After
Judge Martin, we have a matter scheduled for 3 o'clock today, which is Vasto versus Crepe and Simpson. Are you Mr. Vasto?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, am I saying that correctly?
You are?
All right, and then Mr. Dodig, are you on behalf of both of these defendants? Do I recall correctly?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, well, good afternoon to you both. This is a hearing on Mr. Dodig's motion to determine rent. And Mr. Dodig, I'll invite you to go ahead and proceed.
Your Honor, I didn't request the hearing, so I prepared the notice.
Okay.
Because the landlord's pro se, so.
Okay, well, I can drive a little bit. Mr. Vasto, you want to raise your right hand to be sworn in? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, would you tell me your full name?
James William Del Vasto.
All right, and are you, how are you related to this matter? Are you the landlord?
Yeah, I own the property.
Okay, and I've reviewed what you filed as a complaint that has a lease and I think also a rent increase attached. Is all of that truthful?
Yes.
Those are the actual documents, or a copy of the actual documents that you executed with Crepe and Simpson?
Yes.
All right, and so what's the amount of rent that you're currently charging to these folks?
The rent is $900 a month.
Okay, and if I read correctly, you did that in May of last year?
May of 2020, correct.
And yet your document indicates that they signed and accepted that?
Correct.
Okay, and so were they paying $900 after May 1st of last year?
Yes.
And when, if at all, did they stop paying? In other words, through what date are you paid up?
January 1st was the 5th, actually. They have a 5-day grace period, but they did not pay January or February's rent. So,
and that's where this case picks up then, with January and February non-payment?
Correct.
And so is it then $900 January and $900 February that you would claim is outstanding right now?
Well, there's late fees and, there's late fees added to that. So January as of today would be $1,410, and February as of today would be $1,100.
Okay. It's quite a lot.
Honor, I'm not sure those are considered rent. I'm not sure those are considered rent in the lease either, which would not make them collectible.
Go ahead.
Mr. Vasto, go ahead.
Well, according to, I don't understand why it's not collectible, but according to this CDC thing, it says it still says that I'm able to collect late payments and penalties and all that. So as far as I'm concerned, I've not been paid, so the rent is still late.
I understand. And there's a couple different issues running through here, and I can appreciate if you're not a lawyer or a judge, it doesn't always make sense, but you may or may not ultimately be able to collect those. What we're here for today is simply, what is the amount of rent that the court is going to set that Crepe and Simpson would be required to post to the court registry in order to stay in this case and be permitted to dispute it and fight it. And so I'm going to fix an amount today. This is sort of laid over Florida eviction law is the CDC moratorium. Mm-hmm. Normally, I set an amount, give them an extremely short period of time to get it paid. If it's paid, we have a trial right away. If it's not paid, you get a judgment right away.
Okay.
With the CDC, Mr. Dodig's raised an argument that may change things, and I'm prepared to entertain that argument today. But your worst case scenario today is that I agree with Mr. Dodig and indicate that they don't have to pay anything in the meantime. And your best case scenario for today is that I see things your way and I indicate that they have to pay $1,800 immediately to the court registry in order to stay in the fight. The CDC, and Mr. Dodig and I have had a handful of hearings, one very recently. My take on the CDC, and I think it's fairly common, is that you can go all the way up to the 1 yard line on these things, but the CDC won't let you break the plane. Right. So potentially, as Mr. Dodig knows, my read of it is I can order the payment of rent. I can enter a default if the rent has not been paid, and I can basically go all the way up to the edge. What I have been doing in these, if rent isn't paid, is I've given landlords a default and I've promised them a judgment as soon as the moratorium expires. And I've also let them know that there may be procedures for them to contest the CDC declaration. None of that's going on today. What I'm up to today is just figuring out what amount, if any. It sounds like your position would be $1,800 would be just the pure rent outstanding. Correct. And Mr. Dodig is going to raise an argument that that should be zero, I believe. I don't want to steal your thunder, Mr. Dodig, but I read the motion. Yes. And I'll sort that out, and then there may be one or more steps from here that we'll go through. And then we may just, as Mr. Dodig also knows, my tendency on these when I do have both sides present is to also just have a little bit of informal conversation like I am now, to kind of try to make sure both sides know where things stand, and that if there's a chance that perhaps there's any kind of compromise where you give a little and get a little, I'm always open to helping you all explore that, although it's really ultimately not any of my business, and I'm not here to twist anybody's arms. So let me stay on the motion to determine rent first. And so hopefully I've somewhat answered your question, Mr. Del Vasto, that what I'll do today is just look at pure rent. What is the base amount that would have to go into the registry in order for them to meet the statute and stay in the game, so to speak. Late fees may be collectible. I'm not asserting one way or the other, but you're right that the CDC does not take away your right ultimately to try to pursue all amounts due. It just indicates that they can't be hung up on that right now. So Mr. Dodig, let me let you argue. The testimony is that there would be $900 per month for the 2 months. What's the defense position on that?
Well, our position, and I say our, I mean legal aid's position, has historically been, since the CDC moratorium was put in place, that the pursuit of an eviction is in violation of the order. I realize that I'm up against case law from all around the country that may contradict that. However, there is one distinct thing in Florida, which is this statute that requires rent to be deposited to defend a case, which we all struggle with at legal aid. Yeah. And that puts a whole new twist on this, which results in us filing these motions to determine rent in your honor's court. And the simple pursuit of an eviction is where we draw the line. And the landlord wants, and in this case, I will defend Mr. Del Vasto in some respects, which is he pursued the eviction prior to the CDC document being provided to him. So this is unlike a lot of my matters where the landlords are aware of the CDC moratorium declaration from the tenant and they still go and file. So in his defense, he pursued the eviction prior to that document being provided to him. However, at that point, we believe the case should stop and be held in abeyance, if you will, until the CDC moratorium is lifted. So that's our argument. Okay. In this case, I would also argue, which I think Your Honor has already mentioned, that it is pure rent that he should be, if Your Honor rules in his favor, that should be requested to be put into the registry, not any fees or late fees or any attorney. Well, he doesn't have an attorney, but any late fees, because those are not considered rent in the lease.
Okay.
There's one other issue, Your Honor, which isn't germane to this, that I just want to preserve, that I need to bring up to you before we're done. Thank you.
All right. Well, just you want to bookmark that and remind yourself? Okay.
But I forget things too. So
I do too. Well, let me do this before I rule, Mr. Del Vasto. We're in a scenario here, and as Mr. Dodig said, you've been in this eviction posture for a while now. I think you've been, well, I guess the petition, I don't know why they're calling it a petition, but the complaint was filed January.
Yeah.
And so you've got a situation here, and I have not looked at the news today. I think the last I knew for sure was that the CDC was going to go through March. I think
it's still that I didn't mean to interrupt you, Your Honor, but the thing, what has been extended is the foreclosure moratorium to June.
Yeah, and that I had heard, and I hadn't done any research to see, because they'd kind of been traveling together, but not exactly.
Not today, right? Not today.
So nothing. Then I thank you for your candor on that, Mr. Dodig. So nothing yet on evictions, but I think Mr. Del Vasto, there's a again, I'll say best case, worst case. Best case scenario, if the CDC does properly apply to Mr. Dodig's client, you'd be dealing with them through March. And worst case scenario, that could potentially go further. They could track the foreclosure movement and go through June like the foreclosure one just did. We don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball. But I say that because I have admittedly in each of these eviction hearings, whether it's a final hearing or a rent hearing, I have at least been advising both parties that they always have the right to pursue settlement. I'm happy to try to facilitate if there's any interest. I won't twist arms if there's not. I am not here to serve as your lawyer, although I have tried to make sure just the basics of the landscape, you're understanding why, for example, I'm not including late fees right now because the statute doesn't really contemplate that. But I put the question to you, Mr. Del Vasto, and I don't know if Mr. Dodig's client's reachable, but is that something that you all potentially want to explore, seeing whether there's a possibility of settlement? And I'll give you a quick illustration because it might not be obvious. Most frequently, a settlement in a scenario like this is taking the following form. Defendant agrees to exit by a fixed date. As long as defendant is out by the fixed date that both sides accept, then the case goes away, is dismissed. If the defendant stays past the fixed date, then you're entitled to an immediate eviction, and that's regardless of the CDC. So there is some significant incentive in your side that, one, there's certainty, and two, even if the CDC extends, you would be out from under it, so to speak. On Mr. Dodig's side, also the certainty and the opportunity to avoid any judgment, because it also, as I read the CDC, it will not spare someone the eventual tag of a judgment on their record, which can make it very hard to find replacement housing. So because both sides have so much to lose, I've been a little more activist, I know it's such a bad word about judges, but I've been a little bit more energetic about just trying at least to make sure both sides understand. And if you say, Judge, either I'm not interested or my client's not interested, I respect that, that's fine, and I'll rule and we'll wrap up for today. But that's kind of how it would potentially shape up. I don't know, Mr. Del Vasto, if you've thought about it or if you would have any interest in perhaps maybe talking offline with Mr. Dodig to see if anything can be agreed to.
It's a possibility. I wouldn't rule that out as totally unacceptable.
Okay.
I
Okay.
do have some other questions about this CDC order and who actually benefits from the moratorium. So I mean, I don't know if you can ask that next.
It doesn't sound like a question I'm going to be able to answer.
Well, according to this declaration that they sent me, one of the key points in here is number 3. I'm unable to pay the full rent or make full housing payment due to a substantial loss of household income, loss of compensable hours of work or wages, layoff, or extraordinary out-of-pocket medical expenses. Well, both tenants receive Social Security. So there's, as far as I know, the Social Security system has not been affected by COVID-19. Their income should have remained the same, and I believe they're also on Medicaid. So there would be no extraordinary out-of-pocket medical expenses. So how is it that these two are affected by the COVID-19 crisis? I just think this is just another example of people trying to take advantage of a situation that was put in place to actually protect those that actually need it.
Well, and I guess, and I don't know if any of that is known to Mr. Dodig or not, but in answer to your question, I think the best way for me to answer it is this. What I have been doing with these declarations is I have been affording, generally it's going to be the person in your position, Mr. Del Vasto, but either side, the opportunity to request a hearing as an evidentiary hearing, and essentially to test the assertions in the declaration. And it sounds like you, if what you understand is in fact the case, you may have a basis to push me to find that they are not protected by the CDC. I haven't ruled on that either way. I just sort of hit the brakes when I get that declaration in terms of considering any final ruling. This is where Mr. Dodig and I differ slightly. I believe that especially the FAQ from the CDC has given judges some further guidance that we can, again, as I've said, go basically to the 1 yard line and proceed with our case. But yes, Mr. Del Vasto, you absolutely can request a hearing, and then the two defendants would need to appear and be open to trying to basically support their declarations. And it is possible that they cannot support those. I don't make any ruling on that yet, but I have certainly had some folks that met the declaration requirements very well, and I've had some others. I think I shared with Mr. Dodig and the other lawyer, I had one where the landlord had a bunch of text messages from the tenant that said, F you, I'm not paying anything. And I got to go to work now. So yes, there have been people hurting on both sides. There have been good and bad actors on both sides. And I take each case as a blank slate and just work through it to the best of my ability, with hopefully affording dignity to both sides. But yes, that may be something that we raise in this case. Again, if we don't figure out some form of a settlement, and that's another possibility. If you've got a high card on the declaration, maybe that makes it more likely that we might find a settlement. I don't know. Mr. Dodig, have you had any opportunity yet to discuss with your clients the possibility of an alternative arrangement here that goes outside the court and settles?
I always have a conversation, Your Honor, as I'm sure you know, relative to how we're going to resolve this. And there's always a willingness, at least for clients I represent, because I make them be somewhat willing, because I would never foreclose the ability to work something out when someone's housing is on the line. So yeah. I would never do that to my clients. So, but I can't tell you that I can reach them right now. Okay. I did email them yesterday and have not heard back. So okay. As with housing, sometimes my clients, their communication is also difficult because of cell phone bills and other things. So I will certainly reach out to them, and I can actually have a conversation outside of Your Honor's presence with Mr. Del Vasto at some point, if there's some willingness for, I mean, as these cases go, my clients are not very behind in rent. And I know that doesn't help Mr. Del Vasto, but Your Honor and I have seen cases where people are almost a year behind at this point.
10,
so,
12, $15,000.
Yeah. So there may be some willingness, because March is only a few weeks away, so that's another month's rent. So, but I will certainly have that conversation with my client, and then if Mr. Del Vasto is willing, he has my email address, and we can certainly. I don't have any problem doing that if he's willing to do that, to talk.
Okay, Mr. Del Vasto, that might make the most sense for you all to talk on your own time, and as Mr. Dodig noted, built into the equation is some reasonable motivation on their parts. Because the opportunity to come through this without an eviction judgment, the opportunity to have some certainty may be sufficiently motivating. I know it's frustrating all around right now. Mr. Dodig, I've got another hearing at 3:30, so I'm staying on the bench, so to speak. I could put you all into a breakout room. You could mute and try to reach your clients, or you can just catch up with each other on your own time and space.
Yeah, I have something else following this also, Your Honor, so I can't. I can certainly reach out to them this afternoon or tomorrow, and reach out to Mr. Del Vasto now.
Mr. Del Vasto, what's the best way to reach you? Is it by phone or email? What works?
Either. I mean, phone is okay, but email is probably the best.
Okay.
I just don't answer my phone because I get so many spam calls,
I hear you.
Do you have his email, Mr. Dodig?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, here's what I'm going to do for today's business, and I'll let you guys get back to work. I do read the CDC moratorium, as I've noted now, to allow this court to follow the statute up to the point that would involve actually removing anybody from their housing. So I'll continue to follow the statute. It appears to be a relatively straightforward question in this regard. 2 months each at $900, so $1,800 is due now. And I would further note that another $900 would be due on March 1st. There is no grace period in litigation. So in order to avoid a default, the defendants would have to get $1,800, and I'll fix a deadline in a second, $1,800 essentially right away, and another $900 before the close of business on March 1st in order to preserve their standing. Mr. Del Vasto?
Can you make that March 3rd?
I think March 1st is a Monday, isn't it?
She gets her Social Security check on the 3rd, and if you do it on the 1st, they wouldn't be able to make that date. I've always collected the rent from them on the 3rd. Okay, well, I appreciate that bit of generosity, and I'm happy to state that. If the 3rd is a good date, I doubt Mr. Dodig has any objection.
No, Your Honor.
All right, and I know there's some case law on this, Mr. Dodig. I don't quite go as hard as the case law does, which I think says they've got to pay it today, but I've got to set a fairly tight deadline. So what I would propose to do is give them until 2 p.m. Friday to get the $1,800 paid to the clerk. And then it'll be March 3rd, another $900. That's what my order will reflect in order for them to stave off default. If they miss either of those, then Mr. Del Vasto will be entitled to default, and then it's to be determined whether he'll be entitled to final judgment and removal based on whether or not the CDC declaration is appropriate, and based on whether you all can find another way around. So I'll do an order to that effect. Mr. Del Vasto, did you understand what I just set forth, and is there anything else that you want?
I understood that perfectly, yeah.
All right, and Mr. Dodig, anything else we can address for defendants at this point?
Yes, but there's tricky words here, and I just want and I'm not his attorney, but I feel default and judgment are two different things. And I don't know if Mr. Del Vasto understands that. So, because what I've had happen is clients get harassed by landlords, and I'm not saying you, sir, I don't know you, but landlords have said to my clients, well, default was entered, but they don't understand that a judgment wasn't entered. So,
right, because I have to get the default, and then I have to, after the default is issued, I have to request I forget what the next form is.
Judgment.
A judgment.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Then is the writ of possession after that, and the writ of possession is what's not getting executed at this point. I can get up to the writ of possession.
Yes, correct? And I've actually been just a little more conservative.
Right.
I have, and the plaintiff's lawyers are all upset with me, but I'll actually hold the final judgment and the writ, and execute the final judgment as soon as the CDC clears up, and then the language will be that the writ can issue forthwith. A lot of landlords' attorneys want me to do the judgment now and hold the writ, and I think that invites a disaster, and I won't do it. I hold the judgment. You won't have to say, Mother, may I? I'll do it automatically, but I sit on that until for sure the coast is clear. And that way the deputy clerks and the deputy sheriffs don't have to be lawyers. They can just run with the writ because they'll know the judge said it's all green lights.
Right. Well, I had to do this in March, and we were able to get the writ of possession because I had to sign an affidavit and prove that the tenant was not, affected negatively by the COVID crisis.
It was there were a multitude of other laws in effect back then, and now it's just the CDC. But anyway, I know for landlords and for tenants, it has been an odyssey, and keeping up with this requires a pretty keen eye. But Mr. Del Vasto, so far you've been pretty well tracking, I think, here. So I will do that order and require rent to be paid. Should it not be paid, I would be open to granting you a default. But as I noted, unless or until I find the CDC not to apply, I'd be holding that last step with the judgment and the writ that attaches to it.
Right. So I would have to request a hearing for an evidentiary hearing.
On the CDC, if you wish to test that, then yes, you just call up Ann, I think you've spoken with, and all of these things I'm required to set pretty promptly. I do my best, although there's a lot of them right now, but I will get it set as quickly as I can in that regard. And again, for that reason, time might be ripe to have some conversation and see if an alternative can be worked out to the satisfaction or the mutual dissatisfaction of both sides, to at least maybe give you some certainty.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
There's one other thing, just quickly, because I know I see your other cases here. Mr. Del Vasto filed with the court, and I'm objecting to this being included in the docket, a 15-day notice, which would be an entirely different cause of action for eviction. There's no complaint. It's just a 15-day notice, which I don't think should have been filed in this matter. I just saw it this morning, so that's why I'm bringing it up now.
Well, these tenants are month to month. They're not annual lease, so that's I wanted them out at the end of the rental period. I had to give them a 15-day notice.
I think it'll be smart for y'all to talk to each other offline. I saw that just today as well, Mr. Dodig. Okay. And make no comment on whether or not it will be legally appropriate, but I would simply suggest, if you believe it's not, direct a motion to it, and likewise that would be something you probably want to set for hearing, and we can go through
fair enough,
the legality of that, but talk to each other, because I think both sides are motivated, and there may be some benefit available to each of you to leaving me out of it and trying to see if you can craft something on your own. But if not, I'll be here. I'll set you promptly on any such motions.
Okay, thank you, Judge.
Okay, good luck to both sides. You all are free to go.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to start the 3:30 hearing in just one moment. Let me make some notes. Okay, all right, our 3 o'clock hearing is Zlata versus Dunford. The court has set this hearing as a hearing to determine the rent that must be paid into the court registry. Do I have Ms. Zlata present? Okay, and
Yes, yes.
there we go.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
¿Cómo
Muy
está?
bien, gracias.
Okay,
She's doing well, thank you.
okay. And sir, you're assisting with English to Spanish, is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay, can I get your name?
My name is Ronnie, it's R-O-N-N-Y, Marty, M-A-R-T-Y.
Okay, Mr. Marty, thank you for your help today. All right, and then based on the label, I believe this is Mr. Dunford down here.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good afternoon to you as well.
Good afternoon, Judge.
Let me ask Mr. Dunford and Ms. Zlata, would you please each raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Voy a decir un testimonio de la verdad y más que la verdad. Sí, lo
Sí,
juro.
lo juro.
Yes, I do.
Okay, you can all put your hands down. And I'm going to ask some questions of each of you. And Mr. Marty, I don't know whether you do a lot of translating. Are you going to want me to stop so you can translate?
That would be great if you can, yeah.
Okay.
So you said you're gonna ask a few questions first. Ella va a hacer algunas preguntas.
Okay.
But I also want to explain what's happening and what's not happening.
Quiero también explicar qué pasa y qué no pasa.
Okay.
Today's hearing is simply to determine the amount of rent that must be paid by Mr. Dunford.
Hoy solamente es un día para terminar el pago de la renta que tiene que ser pagado por el señor Dunford.
Está bien.
Today is not the actual eviction hearing.
Hoy no es el caso real para sacarlo.
Oh,
Hoy no es esa cosa.
está bien.
I'm going to take testimony from both of you as to what you believe the rent should be as of today.
Voy a tomar testimonio de ambos de ustedes de cuánto debería ser la renta hasta el día de hoy.
Está bien.
And it may be that you agree or it may be that you disagree, but I will decide the final amount.
Ok, quizás usted esté de acuerdo o en desacuerdo, pero yo voy a decidir la cantidad final.
Está bien.
Whatever amount I decide, unless it is zero, will be the amount that Mr. Dunford will have to deposit in the court registry.
Ok, el monto que yo vaya a decidir, a menos que sea cero, el señor Dunford lo va a pagar en la corte, en registrar en la corte.
Está bien.
All right, and then we'll have a few other matters to discuss today, but that's what I'll be working on first, is figuring out how much rent, if any, should be paid.
Ok, hay otras cosas que vamos a discutir, pero por ahora va a ser lo de la renta.
Está bien. Okay.
So I'll start by asking Ms. Zulaga, how much is the rent each month for Mr. Dunford?
Ok, empiezo por preguntarle a la señora Zulaga, ¿usted que cuánto paga él mensualmente de renta?
$800.
$800 a month.
Okay, and Mr. Dunford, I think your answer agrees that that was the monthly amount, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and
That's with everything included, Judge.
okay, And Ms. Zulaga, which day of the month is the rent due?
¿Cuál es el día del mes que se vence la renta?
El 13.
On the 13th of every month.
Okay, and again, I think, Mr. Dunford, that's consistent with your answer, right?
Agreed, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're off to a good start. Ms. Zulaga, when is the last time that you believe Mr. Dunford paid his $800 and had his rent current?
¿Cuándo fue señora Zulaga, cuándo fue la última vez que el señor Dunford pagó la renta a usted?
En noviembre.
It was in November.
Is that the payment that covers from November 13th to December 13th?
¿Esa es la renta que cubre de noviembre 13 a diciembre 13?
Sí.
Yes.
And so if I understand,
No.
I'm sorry.
Excuse
Excuse me.
El 13 de noviembre, no, el 13 de diciembre él tenía que volver a pagar
All right.
para salir enero 13.
Okay. He was supposed to pay for November 13 for November and then December 13 for December.
did he pay you on November 13th?
¿Él le pagó en noviembre 13?
La renta de noviembre, sí. No, él pagó por cuotas.
Pero él pagó en noviembre o no? ¿O
En
pagó octubre?
O sea, pagó el mes de noviembre, el mes de noviembre lo pagó hasta diciembre, o sea, en los primeros
un mes
un
atrasado.
mes atrasado.
Okay, he paid, actually, he paid November delay by quotes. He paid in a few payments, like different payments, $100, $500, $200. So in the whole month until December, he actually was due. The last payment he made, it was $200, December 18.
And was that to cover the rent for November 13th to December 13th?
¿Esta fue para cubrir la renta de noviembre 13 a diciembre 13?
Sí.
Yes.
Okay, so he was late, but he did eventually pay everything to cover November 13th to December 13th.
Él, aunque fue retrasado, pero hizo todos los pagos para estar al día hasta diciembre 13.
No, el 13 de diciembre él tenía que pagar y no pagó.
Pero pagar, ¿qué tenía que
El pagar del 13 de diciembre al 13 de enero.
¿Qué está pagando? ¿Qué mes? ¿Noviembre o diciembre?
Diciembre. O sea, el mes que él pagó fue el mes de noviembre.
Okay, yeah, he covered November.
Okay, so has he paid anything for the December 13th payment yet?
¿Él pagó algo para el pago de diciembre hasta
No.
ahora? No.
What about for the January 13th payment?
¿Y para el 13 de enero?
No.
No.
What about for the February 13th payment?
¿Para el pago de febrero?
No.
No.
And so if I understand, you are saying that it should be $800 for December 13th, January 13th, and February 13th, which would be $2,400. Is that correct?
Okay. Lo que usted dice es que tiene que pagar por la renta de diciembre, enero y febrero. Son $2,400. ¿Está correcto?
Oh, no, yo había dicho el 13 de febrero él tendría que pagar hasta el 13 de marzo si se fuera a quedar. Entonces yo no sé si cuento esa parte. El 13 de febrero si él paga se quedaría hasta el 13 de marzo. Yo quiero
Okay,
que se
I might be a little confusing here. But she says, like, if he pays, let's say that he pays until February 13, he's allowed to be until March 13 into the apartment. So he might be owed only 2 months, I believe.
No, I think I'm understanding right now, he's supposed to have paid $800 last week. That would allow him to stay until March 13th.
That is correct. That is correct.
Rent is always paid in advance. So if I want to move in March 1st, I have to pay for all of March on March 1st.
You're right, Your Honor. Entonces ella dice que la renta se paga por adelantado. Si me quiero quedar, debería haber pagado ya.
sí.
You're right.
So it would be $2,400, but that would then make him current all the way till March 13th.
Okay. Eso va a ser 2.400 hasta la fecha de marzo 13.
Ok, gracias.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dunford, let me turn to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you agree with that? And if not, what are your points of disagreement?
Okay, so for our original lease was from the last month was from December 13th to January 13th. So we had no agreement after the December 13th payment. I asked her to tell me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to have you talk in bites so that
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Marti can translate.
Absolutely.
But let me explain something to both sides that might help with where you're going.
Yes, ma'am.
In Florida law, if you have a lease that expires,
Yeah.
both sides are perfectly free to continue the renting relationship.
Okay.
What happens is that the terms of the lease just continue on.
I got you.
I'm giving him a second to translate.
Yeah.
So your answer said she never told you how much to pay, but really what the law says is you continue to pay the same amount.
I understand.
Unless you both agree to a new amount.
Okay. Matt.
One more second.
Yeah.
The other piece of information that may be helpful to both is that when a lease expires and both sides decide to continue, the law says automatically the lease is month to month.
Okay.
30 days at a time. It just continues under the same terms. So pay on the 13th, pay 800, but it will be 1 month at a time. In other words, either side can end the lease with a short notice because there's no longer, for example, a 6-month lease or a 12-month lease that gives you a longer stay.
Okay.
Follow, Mr. Dunford?
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Mr. Marti, were you all able to keep up and translate that, or do you need a minute?
No, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Dunford, you were starting to tell me that that Ms. Zulaga had agreed to let you stay on past the January 13 expiration.
Yes, ma'am.
Your answer said that you didn't know how much you should pay. And I've just explained, since I've been trained on this, the answer is just that same 800.
I know. Yeah.
So,
but the only thing that I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. The only thing that I had inquired about, and I had mentioned this to them many times, is that my rent was 800 with everything included. Now, previous to the December 13th payment, I had verbally mentioned them twice, as well as letting the code enforcement know that I have no hot water in my kitchen sink and in my bathroom sink. And that was mentioned to code enforcement twice, which I have, the case numbers for that as well. And that was never fixed. So I feel like, being a pandemic right now, I mean, that's a huge factor in rent,
Okay, but have you had to move out?
No, I have not.
You all have continued to stay there?
Yes.
Is there any part of the house that you can't use?
No, I mean, it's a little, it's like a studio on the side of the house. So it's not, I don't have access to the whole house.
Okay, but your property there, you can use each of the rooms and
well, it's only one room, Judge.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So what you are suggesting is that you should be allowed to withhold rent based on the hot water issue.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And have you at any point delivered to Ms. Zulaga any written demand indicating that you were going to withhold rent on the hot water issue.
Yes, ma'am. I did write her a letter, and I stated in the letter that we need to figure something out because, you know, it's been an ongoing issue for over, you know, I had no hot water period for over a month at one point.
Okay. And when was the hot water corrected?
It has not been corrected yet, only in the shower. I still have no hot water currently to this date in the kitchen sink or in the bathroom sink.
Did you used to have hot water in the kitchen, or have you never had hot water in the kitchen?
I used to have hot water in the bathroom. In the kitchen, it has never been hot water. But for some reason, when they fixed or they attempted to fix it, it was only the shower that got turned back on.
Okay, but you do have hot water in the shower.
In the shower only, yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. And do you know when that was corrected?
That was corrected, I would say, like 12/17, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you said that you did deliver in writing notice that you would withhold rent?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you keep a copy of that, or do you have?
I don't have it on hand, but I'd have to look for it, Judge. I don't know if I have it on hand or not,
Okay.
but I could definitely look for it for sure.
Okay. And Ms. Zulaga, you are showing some papers. Do you have a paper from Mr. Dunford similar to what he's describing?
Usted tiene una documentación del señor Dunford, similar a lo que él describió en la carta que él le envió a usted. Si lo tiene, dígalo.
Él me envió, pero como aclarando lo de la renta, y en otra carta del 19, pero de noviembre, nada que ver de lo del agua. Lo hablamos así.
All right. Yeah, he sent me 2 documents. The first one, it was about the rent, and the second one, el segundo que fue. Me dijo el primer documento fue de la renta y el otro.
El otro fue de un documento que él me mandó que ya estaba atrasada la renta, que le diera más plazo porque no tenía cómo pagarla, y que él estaba muy contento porque nosotros habíamos sido muy buenos con él.
All right. So the document,
y que él estaba muy contento en el apartamento.
Yeah, the document states the first one, it was about the rent, and the second one was thanking me because he was so happy in the apartment. He was happy with the treatment, the way that we are treating him.
Okay.
And that stayed on the letter, that he was happy with that.
All right. Well, what I have to do from this hearing is figure out how much rent is due. And the figure is $2,400, which I may need to reduce somewhat based on Mr. Dunford's testimony that he did give written notice. The statute requires that. Although you've also stated that at least with regard to the shower, the problem was fixed within a handful of days of that 12/13 due date for your rent.
Sorry to interrupt, Your Honor. It's just to translate her. Dice que esta audiencia es solamente para determinar cuál es el monto que él va a pagar, tiene que pagar, se va a reducir el monto. Entonces, en base a lo que él dijo del agua caliente, entonces por eso tiene que tomarse en consideración.
Ok, usted me hace favor y me le traduce. Yo, cuando él me dijo lo del agua caliente,
when he told me about the hot water,
yo tengo una aseguranza que se llama Choice Warranty Warranty.
I have insurance, my home insurance, which is the name is
the Home Warranty.
Choice Home Warranty. That's the insurance name.
Y yo llamé y lo reporté.
And I called them and reported.
El 11 de diciembre.
December 11, I reported the damage about the hot water. It was only in the shower that was reported.
Y tengo el número de reclamo.
And I have the claim number from the insurance company.
Ok. Luego ellos mandaron de Gator Plumbing de Gator Plumbing.
So the insurance company, they send another company, a third party company, which is the Gator Drain and Plumbing.
Y vinieron, la cita la dieron para el 14.
And they arranged to come on December
Y
14th.
este fue lo que dijeron, ¿cierto?
And then
Que
can I read what they stated on the paper that they gave me?
Entonces, yo llamé el 11, el 14 vino de Gator Plumbing.
I got on the 11th of December, so the Gator Drain and Plumbing came on the 14th.
No quedó bueno el agua, volví a llamar el 15.
The water was not fixed, so I recall on the 15th of December.
Y volvieron a venir otra vez de Plumbing a mirar el problema.
And they came back, the same company, to see the problem.
Como el problema seguía, ya la segunda visita dijeron que era problema de electricidad.
As the problem continued, they decided that the problem is not about plumbing, it's about electricity.
Yo llamé el día 16 a warranty, a choice on warranty.
On December 16, I called the insurance company.
Y dieron cita y el día 23, el día 24 vinieron y arreglaron de Proelectric de acá.
So the insurance company sent Proelectric of Southwest Florida to fix the problem.
Yes,
it was on December the 23rd.
Y ahí dice que fue, reemplazaron eso.
And it states, replace existing thin 2-pole 38 MP breaker which only have 120 V. New breaker provides 220 V.
Eso, entonces ya el problema del agua caliente de la ducha quedó arreglado.
So the problem with the hot water in the shower was fixed.
Agua en el lavamanos y en el lavaplatos, desde que él aceptó el apartamento, en esa parte nunca ha habido agua caliente.
Okay, since he accepted the lease and he moved into the apartment, we never had hot water in the sink, in the kitchen, never, and he knew that since the moment that he moved in, and that's the way he accepted.
Okay. Well, so what I'm going to do is this. Again, the figure is 2,400, and I'm going to reduce that slightly for the few weeks that the shower did not have hot water.
Okay, lo que vaya a hacer es que va a tomar la decisión cuál es el monto final, va a reducirlo. Y es por algunas semanas que no tuvo agua caliente.
Ok, de todas maneras yo tuve mucho esfuerzo. Ok.
So, as I asked Mr. Dunford, he was able to live there, he was able to do everything, but he did not have hot water for the first part of that December rental period.
Judge, it was actually over a month that I didn't have hot water, period, at all.
Well, I think from the time that you gave her the notice of the intention to withhold the rent is my concern.
Okay, I can give you a date exactly. Let's see,
It actually, as long as it's December, it doesn't much matter because you paid the full rent the month before.
Yeah.
So December would have been the first time you would have withheld.
Okay.
And where tenants get confused is they think they can withhold all the rent.
Okay.
Based on a relatively small problem. Now I know hot water is important.
Yeah, yeah.
But it doesn't make your rent zero.
Yes, okay.
So what I'm gonna do is, it looks like you had no hot water for about 10 days. And what I'm gonna do is take that month's 800 down to 700. Everything else in the apartment was still usable. If you had to move out, then it might be that you could withhold the whole 800. Sometimes with hurricanes, we see that the place is destroyed and you have to leave.
Yeah.
Well, but if you're living there, sleeping there, you've got food in the refrigerator and so forth, it's more of a discount.
Okay.
So it's obviously a little bit arbitrary, but I think that a fair figure would be 100. And then for January 13 and February 13, you would owe the regular 800. And so I'll take the 2,400 for the 3 months and drop it to 2,300, basically discounting for the 10 days without hot water. And what I'm going to do is, the law requires me to require you to pay that into the court registry very quickly. What the law, are you keeping up? I'm sorry, Mr. Marty. Okay. What the law assumes in a situation like this is that even though you had the hot water question and you said you were confused about what the rent amount should be, the law assumes that you have $800 each month and that you're simply holding it so that these questions can be answered. Okay. So you may or may not be sitting on 2,400 or 2,300.
Yes, ma'am.
But the law assumes that you are, and that you're in a position to pay that right away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a very short deadline to pay that to the court registry. And the deadline would be 2 o'clock Friday afternoon. So you'd have about 1.5 business days to get the amount of 2,300. The clerk does charge a small surcharge, so it's not 2,300 even.
Okay.
There'll be a slight surcharge. You'll have to pay that as well, so that the net is 2,300 by 2 o'clock on Friday. And that's what you would need to do, Mr. Dunford, in order to maintain your right to fight the eviction.
Okay.
If you don't pay that amount in full on time, and the law is very unforgiving, if you're $1 short or 5 minutes late, it says sorry.
Yeah.
It's a very harsh law.
Okay.
So 2,300 plus the clerk's fees by 2 o'clock on Friday, which is the 19th. And if you don't pay that, then you no longer have any right to fight the eviction. But we have a second issue, because I believe you have filed a CDC declaration. Do I remember that correctly, Mr.?
Yes, that is correct, Judge.
Okay. Now, with the CDC, they have ordered that evictions cannot be completed. Tenants cannot be actually removed while the moratorium is in place if the tenant qualifies for protection. So Mr. Dunford has filed the form claiming he is entitled to the protection. And if we didn't have the CDC, Mr. Dunford, you would have to pay this rent or be subject to immediate eviction Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
With the CDC, even if you don't pay all of the rent on time, you will not be thrown out until the CDC expires.
Okay.
Right now, that date is the end of March. However, Ms. Zulaga can ask me for another hearing like this, which I will set very quickly, and both of you can testify about the facts to see whether you qualify for the CDC protection.
Okay.
If I find that you qualify, you would be protected until that expires.
Okay.
Right now, that's the end of March. It may get extended longer and it may not.
Okay.
If I find you do not qualify, that you are not entitled to the protection, and if you have not paid the rent that I've just ordered on time,
Yes, ma'am.
then you could be evicted immediately. Do you follow how all that
Yes,
works?
ma'am. Yep.
It's two different layers.
I got you.
So, Ms. Zulaga, were you able to understand my explanation of how this works from here?
¿Entendió la explicación de ella de cómo funciona esto hasta ahora?
Sí,
Yes.
gracias.
Okay. So I'm going to enter the order for 2,300 due by 2 o'clock to the clerk this Friday. And again, there are clerk's fees to include. I will leave it. Either one of you can request a hearing for the declaration. And I want to note one more thing. I'll answer Ms. Zulaga in a moment. The other thing that I want to mention is that you are free to negotiate with each other. You are free to see whether you can reach any form of settlement. A lot of people in your positions have been reaching settlements, and that means that each of you would get part of what you want, but you would also not get everything you want.
Yeah.
One example would be the possibility that maybe Mr. Dunford only has part of the money, but maybe Mr. Dunford agrees that he'll pay what he can, and maybe Ms. Zulaga agrees that as long as he pays a certain amount, that he can stay until March 13th or whatever date you agree. If you all do make an agreement, the way it works is this: as long as Mr. Dunford does his part, and if there's rent, he pays it, and if there's a deadline, he obeys the deadline. As long as he does his part, the case would be dismissed, and Mr. Dunford would have the benefit of avoiding an eviction judgment, which
Gotcha.
can make it very hard to get a new place to live. But if Mr. Dunford doesn't follow the agreement, then Ms. Zulaga would be entitled to have Mr. Dunford evicted right away. And that would be regardless of the CDC. That's the big benefit to someone in Ms. Zulaga's position, is the possibility that she could have some certainty. Possibly she can get some rent, I don't know. And she can be guaranteed that you would be evicted if you didn't follow through. Do you follow
So now,
that, Mr. Dunford?
yeah, I just had one question. Like, how do I have to request a hearing for that? Like, how do I do that?
Request a hearing for what?
Like, say for instance, on the CDC thing.
Either of you can request a hearing for me to consider whether you should be protected by the CDC.
Okay, now how do I do that?
Just contact my office and request a hearing.
Okay, you got it. Yep.
Yep, either of you can do that. Ms. Zulaga, you had some questions.
Yo expongo que quiero una nueva audiencia.
Sí, pero eso ya.
Okay, ya está. Esto no continúa.
No, diga lo que usted quiere.
Ok. Su señoría, yo
no.
quiero.
Yo
quiero que él se vaya por mi salud, la de mi familia, por la seguridad. O sea, yo ya había hablado con él y le había dicho que no nos pagara el mes de renta y más 15 días.
Yeah. What I want is for him to leave right away. It's for my healthy, my family healthy. We don't feel comfortable.
I can't help you with that. I can't just make him leave. I have to follow the law, which I have tried to explain. It is a little bit complicated right now. And the CDC may protect him in staying there through March. And it may be extended even past then. This is why it may be beneficial to see if there's any compromise. But I understand you may want Mr. Dunford out now, and I also understand Mr. Dunford may want to stay as long as he can. I don't know, Mr. Dunford, if you have another place or if you have a hope that you may soon have another place, but I just encourage both parties to consider if there is a compromise, because both sides do have a lot to gain and a lot to lose, and I respect that. And Mr. Dunford, I know you mentioned a child, so I'm sensitive to it, and also to what Ms. Zulaga said.
Absolutely.
Once these things happen, it's usually at least uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Ms. Zulaga, go ahead.
Ya puedo bajar la mano.
Ok, ya puedo bajar la mano. Ok. Son muchas cosas que realmente me están afectando.
It is a lot of things that are affecting me.
A él se le entregó, ¿esto lo puedo mencionar ya?
Si quiere.
Ok. A él se le entregó un apartamento organizado.
When we gave him the apartment the first time, it was totally clean, neat, and organized.
Estrenando nevera, o sea, todas las
Everything
cosas.
was on there. See the condition of the apartment.
Que él tenga
Right now.
las cosas de la manera.
I can show you the apartment right now, Judge.
Destruir.
Yeah, he is destroying the apartment.
Okay.
That's not true.
No, pide películas on demand en Compact.
Un
Exagerado.
momento.
De 20, 320.
On top
200,
of that, he didn't destroy the apartment. I'm sorry.
películas on demand.
This is not for me to consider today.
I know.
Okay. Oh, okay.
We understand, yeah.
The condition of the apartment is not part of what you have asked me to decide. You have only sued Mr. Dunford to get possession. You have not sued for any damages. And even if you did, that isn't what I'm here to decide today. Yes, ma'am?
Yes.
Ok. Yo quiero, su señoría, solicitar el desalojo. Yo no quisiera la plata con tal de que él se vaya.
Your
por
Honor,
nuestra tranquilidad.
Your Honor, what I want, and I know this hearing is
Yo le
about the
perdono
rent,
eso.
the payment, but I don't want the payment. I don't want the rent. He can keep it. I just want him to get out of the apartment right away for my health and my family health.
Okay. Let me just ask Mr. Dunford, that's at least a good starting point. If there wouldn't be any rent required, do you have a place to go? And if so, how soon might you be able to get out if you want to consider a compromise?
That's what I'm waiting on now, Judge, is actually an answer to that question. I actually just put an application into the Point Santa Apartments. I'm just waiting to hear back. So I am trying to move on. I am.
Well, the trick might be that trying to get another place while this eviction is open against you,
Yeah,
may make that impossible.
absolutely.
So we may get stuck in a circle.
Okay.
But what you might want to do is contact Point Siena to find out how soon you might be able to get there.
Okay.
And
And then come to a compromise with Miss Zuliana?
if you all are able to agree, and if not, you can get back with me.
Okay.
But she's been very generous to suggest
Absolutely.
if you get out, because 2,300 is probably close to what you'll need for Poinciana to start over.
Yeah.
So it may be in everybody's best interest to see how quickly you could relocate.
Okay.
And then if for example, if Poinciana says, as long as your eviction's dismissed, we'll take you March 1st, then we could make an agreement.
Okay.
You would be out March 1st. If we do make the agreement, I will dismiss the case now, but I keep power to enforce your promise. So we get our cake and we can eat our cake.
Yeah.
I would dismiss the case, but I would still have power that if you're still at Ms. Zulaga's on March 2nd, she could throw you out right away, and you would have an eviction judgment. So it will be important for you to make a deal that you know you can keep.
Okay.
But it will also be important to move pretty quickly, because the longer you stay, the less benefit Ms. Zulaga gets out of the deal.
Yeah.
And so that's why I would be hopeful maybe that Poinciana can take you quickly.
Okay.
If you're in a small place, then maybe that means at least there's not too much to pack up and move for you and your son.
Yeah.
Can I clarify anything else, Mr. Dunford? And then I'll ask the same question of Ms. Zulaga.
No, I think you've covered everything. Thank you very much, Judge.
It's pretty confusing, I know. Ms. Zulaga, anything else I can clarify for you?
¿Quiere aclarar para él?
Sí, o sea, el contrato era para él solo. El niño viene
No,
de
pero
vez
eso
en
es
cuando los fines de semana.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Just saying that the lease was for one person only, no child was included. But that's not what you're discussing right now. We're discussing about the rent. That's what I told her.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, but as long as, we will all pray together that Mr. Dunford can get an opportunity soon with Poinciana, then maybe everybody can get what they need here and move on in their own directions. So I'll certainly pray for that as well.
Thank you so much, Judge.
Okay, and I've got emails for both of you. I will do the order on the rent, and either of you can request a hearing on the CDC. But if you make an agreement, the best is to write it and both of you sign it, and then you can send it to the clerk so that I know what your agreement is.
Okay.
Okay. Or if you need my help, then you can contact me. I'll try to help.
Okay.
You can't contact me directly, but you can contact my assistant and I'll figure it out. But if you do have an agreement, you both have email. I know Ms. Zulaga only speaks Spanish, but you could together email my assistant and just tell me what the deal is, and I could do the paper for you.
Okay.
Okay? I'll try to help as best I can because I know it's hard for both of you. All right, with that, I think that's everything that we can take care of today. So I encourage you all to try to be kind to each other and considerate. Hopefully you will both be out of a difficult situation very soon. And if you need further help from the court, you can contact my assistant. But it is best if when you contact her that you copy the other side so that we are appropriate. Ms. Zulaga,
Okay.
one more question?
pues yo quería decirle que nosotros hemos hecho todo lo humanamente posible por ayudarlo, pero la verdad, él no se prestó como para eso.
All right. We have done everything humanly possible to help him, but he is not cooperating.
Okay. Well, it's gonna, one way or another, it's going to end fairly soon. If this works well, it may end well fairly soon for both sides. That is my hope.
Yeah.
But I am not here to determine who's a good guy or a bad guy. I just have to follow the law, and I want to try to help you both get through this. So please be very careful. Mr. Dunford will certainly get in contact with Point Siena to find out exactly what he can do and how fast he can do it. And that's probably our best hope for a good outcome there. And that's as much as I can tell you today. Okay, good luck, everybody. That will conclude our